Hey everyone, my name is Harkvlog. I'm a techno and house music DJ and producer, and today I want to talk about my album. This album was a project I did for my university dissertation where I had to create 30 minutes of audio based on a particular theme. The theme or idea for my production project was to create a loop album, an album that loops from the end back into the beginning and also has the songs flow seamlessly into one another, thus creating a seamless loop of music. I wanted the listener to be able to start the album from any point and be able to listen to it in its entirety and finish back where they originally started. There are individual tracks on the album, but each song features elements such as percussion, reverb types, risers, effects of other tracks from the album to help create continuity across the project and also help with the immersion that they're listening to a loop of audio. There are peaks and troughs like a traditional album, but there won't be sort of the typical beginning, middle and end narrative that tells a story. The inspiration for this project comes from King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, who are an Australian psych rock band who released an infinite loop album called Nonagon Infinity. I love the idea of combining songs together so that they flow and connect, and I saw a lot of similarities between this album and DJing. This is when I had the idea of creating a project that uses links between each track to help keep the flow of music consistent. The first step in creating this project was to investigate the typical layout and structure of an album. History and the current music charts would suggest that popular albums have traditionally used songs as pieces of a larger overall concept, with each track representing a different part of the journey of that album. Daft Punk's album Discovery has an overarching theme of discovering music objectively as a child, but also each individual track is able to be understood when listened to on its own. On The Weeknd's latest album After Hours, each song has its own narrative, but also forms part of a larger concept. This concept being more about artistic expression and exploration in musical styles, rather than creating music from a particular perspective. But where albums like these differ from the concept that I'm investigating is that each song stands alone. There is a stop in the audio signal between the songs. There is no desire to keep the momentum or the ambience of the current song flowing into the next one. But Pink Floyd's album Wish You Were Here, the songs represent something on their own but also contribute to the overall story. However, on the first and second track and the fourth and the fifth track, there is a link. There is a shared sound that connects the songs together that keeps the momentum going. The sounds used are a low rumbling drone for the first connection and a filtered white noise for the second, but this idea is practiced in a more musical way on Green Day's album American Idiots, where the songs Boulevard of Broken Dreams are connected using the long release of a guitar chord from the track Holiday. The release of the guitar chord lasts for approximately 15 seconds between the two songs, with the next song, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, beginning 5 seconds in. It is this more musical approach I aimed for with my project, using musical elements to connect songs together and keep the overall flow and momentum moving. Looking to see if loop albums are actually a thing? Well, not really. Pink Floyd once again used the same technique to link two songs together on their album The Wall, where the end of the last song on the album connects with the song at the beginning, using a phrase, "Isn't this where?" is the final line of the last song, and "We Come In" opens the whole album. But once again, this album focuses on a narrative rather than being a continuous loop of music, but it can be listened to in a continuous loop as the connection between the end and the beginning is seamless. The hip-hop group Brockhampton follow a similar idea, but instead use the same technique as Pink Floyd to link a trilogy of albums, Saturation, Saturation 2 and Saturation 3. The sound used to connect these three albums is a heavily processed and indistinguishable vocal loop on the last song of Saturation 3 and on the first song of the first Saturation album. It seems that the idea of creating an album that can be listened to from the beginning to the end and then back to the beginning again is not particularly common, as artists like to focus more on a linear narrative. But to better understand how an album can be listened to in a continuous loop, we have to better understand how Nonagon Infinity works. They use a few different techniques to help create a continuous loop of music. The first two tracks are connected using the same instrumentation, melodies and tempo. The first track ends with a chorus, there is a scream, and then the second track starts with an instrumental that sounds like it could be part of the first song. This is because of the same instrumentation, tempo and distinctly crunchy aesthetic that help glue the two tracks together. The next song connection uses the same technique as before, but this time the lead guitar sound of track 3 is playing the same melody of the final chorus of song 2 right up until when it ends, and then starts playing the melody of the third track on the album. On the Genius lyrics page for the song Robots Stop, it describes part of the lyrics as being an album chorus. This helps the album feel seamless, but also something that is listened to in its entirety, as the songs share common elements such as an album chorus. Looking at how the album loops back into the beginning, the final track contains a breakdown after the instrumental. This breakdown uses the same guitars, drums and vocal and plays a 4-bar loop on repeat, slowly increasing in tempo and intensity until it reaches the speed and sound of the next track. But the next track doesn't begin just yet. The 20-second intro is part of the last audio track before transitioning into the album chorus, which is when track 1 of the whole album then begins. By having the intro of a song at the end of the previous audio file and changing tracks at the beginning of the verse or chorus, this means when starting the album from track 1, the listener is immediately thrown into the album. The listener doesn't have the opportunity to establish that the first part of the first song is an introduction, because there is no introduction. It immediately starts with a climax. Whilst this concept works within the context of Nonagon Infinity, the album is high energy and quite intense. I had no desire to create something this intense and wanted to take a slightly more laid-back approach with a slower tempo and focus more on techno grooves, rhythms, and not as high tempo and psychedelic as Nonagon Infinity is. During a feedback session at university during one of my lectures, where we were discussing ideas for how to approach my idea of creating a loop album, one idea suggested was to create a large 10-minute song and divide it in half to create 2 smaller songs. I liked this idea as it was in keeping with my theme of continuity. A song that uses this idea is End Station by Inholt Denacht and Echoes of October. It uses the same kick, bass and percussion throughout the 11 minutes, but the lead sounds are different. The first half uses 3 one-shot sounds very repetitively and very rhythmically, whilst the second half uses an arpeggiated lead sound and a pad. The 2 styles are contrasting but are tied together using the same drums and bass. The song is convincing despite the transition not particularly being subtle. The one-shot sound ends and the arpeggiated lead is introduced straight after with the opening of a low-pass filter. All of this while the kick and the bass are continuously playing underneath. To summarise, I successfully created a loop album where the end flows seamlessly back into the beginning. While some of the transitions were perhaps a little bit uninspiring in places, I'm happier that the whole project flows seamlessly. Another thing to bear in mind, this was created 2 years ago, and I have developed a lot both as a music producer and as a music listener, and comparing the work with my current standards, it could be improved slightly, perhaps with a more consistent style, not going from a tech house track into something dark and melodic. It maybe would have been good to bunch up the transitions in places and not have 30 seconds worth of audio where it's just a drum beat and a filter opening a sound, but it is what it is. I got 68 out of 100 for this project, alongside my dissertation, which is basically what you're listening to now as I reread it to you, just a slightly more condensed version. Getting 68 out of 100 is essentially the highest mark you can get in the second tier of grades, with the highest band being 72 and above. This kind of project is something I would love to revisit at some stage. I can definitely see some potential in creating a nature-inspired dub techno album where the tracks overlap using field recordings, sharing similar percussions or bass elements. I've definitely got half an eye on undertaking something like this in the future. This wraps up everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed the album. If you haven't heard it, link is in the description where you can listen to it in full, alongside lots of other lovely links to my other pieces of work. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!